Welcome once again. I am Kay Wilson, joining you again this week for our immigration updates. Say hi as you join in, and as usual, let me know where you're joining me from. We have a few things to cover today, so I will get right in. I'm going to start with the provincial draws. Hi, Peter Gay. All right, so yeah, I'm going to start with the PNP draws. So this week, I want to highlight BC. Okay, I see a lot of folks joining from Jamaica, St. Lucia. Good day. Welcome. St. Lucia. Okay, Peter Gay from Montego Bay. Welcome. Nice to have you. All right, so I'm going to start with the PNP draws, right? So British Columbia, as per usual, you can count on BC to have their weekly PNP draws. So of course, this week was no different. They rotate between different streams. So some days it's going to be like a tech draw, and others I see. Okay, from Trinidad. Welcome. Yeah, so some days it might be a tech draw, while other days it may not be. So they had a draw on the 15th, which was yesterday. They invited 140 candidates to apply for permanent residence, and this was a tech draw. The previous week, on February 8th, they had another draw, which was where they drew 188 candidates, and it was from various streams. So they had the skilled workers, international graduates, they had the express entry, skilled worker, and the various streams in express entry, right? And they also have like an entry level and semi-skilled stream. So BC is a great place for provincial nominations in terms of weekly draws. And you're going to see why PNPs are so important when we touch on some of the other things, right? I'm going to also touch a bit on the Natasha from Cyprus. Welcome. I'm also going to touch on some of the happenings this past week, especially as it relates to the immigration levels plan, right? The much anticipated plan. Welcome, Rolana. Thanks for joining. The much anticipated plan that the government of Canada released this week. So before I go to that, I also wanted to mention that Ontario as well had a draw on February 9th, where they invited people to apply under the employer job offer streams. So this was a foreign worker and in-demand skill streams. And then in this draw, they invited candidates from a number of different NOCs. So that's for Ontario, right? And next is Manitoba. So Manitoba also had a draw on February 10th, and they invited 273 candidates to apply for PNP, provincial nomination, under various streams. So they have the skilled workers in Manitoba, skilled workers overseas, international education streams, as well as express entry, okay? The other one worth mentioning is the Nova Scotia draw. So Nova Scotia actually had a draw on February the 8th where they invited nurses. So you'll find with Nova Scotia, this draw is going to be exclusively from the express entry system, right? And Nova Scotia tends to, sometimes when they will draw for specific occupations. And those occupations will look differently for each draw, right? So if you are a nurse, you need to be in the express entry system for sure to have an opportunity at some of these provincial draws. So Nova Scotia NOC 3012, which is those under that NOC, which are nurses. So that was a big draw, and they have them from time to time. So you don't know when they're going to draw, but of course, again, for you to get selected and have an opportunity where that's concerned, you must be in the pool. Now, I am going to move on to some news that was also recently released. The government of Canada announced that they are going to do a series of adjustments to the current border measures, right? So they are going into a phased process of easing travel restrictions. So that's actually some good news for those who want to travel to Canada and have not been able to do so because they may not meet some of the exemptions, right? And so what does that mean? Canada is easing its border restrictions effective February 28th. So it's not yet effective. It will be effective on the 28th, where they're allowing fully vaccinated travelers to be able to come to Canada without having to do a pre-arrival test, a COVID test, right? So previously, all travelers would need to be tested prior to coming to Canada. Now they're easing that. Fully vaccinated travelers can come to Canada without being tested. That said, if you are not vaccinated, it still remains you cannot travel to Canada, right? If you're unvaccinated and you don't meet one of the there are very few exemptions, but if you don't meet one of those exemptions, you cannot travel to Canada as an unvaccinated traveler unless you are a Canadian citizen or permanent resident that's returning to Canada, right? Otherwise, you will not be able to travel to Canada if you're not vaccinated and you're not exempted. So even though testing is not a requirement, it will also mean that you could be tested, right? Because they will be doing on-arrival testing for certain travelers. So you could be selected at random to do a test when you come to Canada. So it's not required, but you can still be selected during the random selections at the airports or wherever it is that you're entering Canada from. And so you can also be selected for testing. They have eased a lot of the restrictions where that's concerned. They are also, just go to that section. So remember, when you're traveling to Canada, you still have to, download the ArriveCan app and input your proof of vaccination in the app before you would be allowed to travel to Canada. So that's still a requirement. Travelers still have to get the app. They're allowing international flights to travel to most airports now. Previously, with the restrictions that were in place, flights from overseas were able to only travel to certain airports, like the major cities. So now, with the easing of the restrictions, they're now resuming travel to basically most airports in Canada, right? So that's actually good news. So that was recently announced. And then the other one that I wanted to mention here as well is the launching of the new PR tracker. So Canada recently launched a PR tracker tool, a portal that is aimed at helping people who have applied for some sort of sponsorship. So that is if you have applied for spousal sponsorship, or so sponsoring your spouse or common law partner, dependent child, applicants or their representatives. So if you're working with an immigration consultant or a lawyer, will be able to use that tracker to get status updates on the application. So it will provide updates on application processing and be able to track the different movements in the system of the application. They did note, however, so if you were to even go online and try to check the status of an application, Canada does post their application processing time, so the estimated time that it may take for your application to be processed. However, as a result of COVID, you will see a warning, right? So if you go on the application processing page to check the processing times for your application or based on the type of application that you submitted or are planning to submit, you will see an estimated time, but they will also say that they can provide an accurate processing time. So they'll say, due to COVID-19, we can't provide an accurate processing time. So they'll tell you how long it usually takes. For example, so with this type of application, sponsoring a spouse or a common law partner, usually that's supposed to take about 12 months, right? Now they're saying with their limited capacity to process applications, they can't guarantee a time and they can't tell you really how long it's going to take. So that's kind of the situation here that we are faced with. in terms of application processing. And it's not just applicable to those, it's applicable straight across the board. All right, so the next thing I wanted to look at is, of course, the very thing that everybody was waiting for, the Canadian immigration levels plan, right? So the government of Canada announced their immigration levels plan, which this is a report that is actually prepared annually, where the government has to estimate what their plans are as it relates to immigration for the next 3 years. So that was announced this week. And so the government announced their plan for 2022 to 2024. And over that period of time, Canada is set to welcome over 1.3 million new permanent residents, right? So this is over a 3-year period. Over 1.3 million new permanent residents in Canada. So that's actually good news, right? It's the highest that Canada has ever accepted or planned to accept in terms of permanent residents, right? So that's great news. However, if I'm to look a little bit closer at the details that they have provided, it may not be such great news for people in certain classes of the different applications or the different programs. So, for example, if we are to look at the breakdown of these immigration targets, so in 2022, the target is 431,645. So that's huge. This is actually revised from previously. It was still over 400,000, but not as much, right? So that has been increased. In 2023, and then in 2024, the target is 451,000. So these are very high overall. But if you are to look at the specific categories, so I'm going to start with the first one that they have is the federal high skilled. So the federal high skilled programs are the programs that are in the express entry system, right? So the federal skilled worker program, the federal skilled trades, and the Canadian experience class. So those are the programs that are managed in express entry. Now the target for those is 55,900 with a low range of 52 and a high range of 64,000. So remember, these are ranges. So they may have as low as 52, they may have as high as 64,000, right? So this is the target that's being set. You will note if you looked at the previous target that they had for 2022, this has significantly decreased. This number was over 100,000 previously, and it has gone down now to 55,000, right? So that means that if we are to look at the express entry pool, the candidates that are in the pool right now are at least 200,000. And so if they plan to accept 55,900 in 2022, 75,750 in 2023, and then it's expected that it should go back to the usual levels of over 100,000 by 2024. And a lot of this is as a result of the current backlog that the government is dealing with in terms of its application processing, right? And so they have had to cut the targets for this program or for these programs, the federal high skills programs, because of the capacity in terms of processing and in terms of the number of applications that they currently have. Remember, these quotas are based on the number of permanent residents that will be admitted. So if they have applications that are currently in progress, they're not finalized, we have applicants who have not been granted permanent resident status. So those would have to be factored into before new applications can be factored into. Now, if I look at, they have federal economic and public policies, 40,000, right? And the 40,000 speaks to 40,000 in 2022 and then 32,000 in 2023. So this is speaking to, if you look at the notes that they have, it speaks to the temporary public policies that the government implemented as a result of dealing with the COVID-19 situations for those in Canada. So that is essentially the TR to PR program. So if you look at the previous plan that was released for 2022, this was not there. So what they have done essentially is to, they had to include this in the plan, which would have taken some of the allocation that was there for the federal high skills, and they've had to move that to the TR to PR applicants. Because remember, this was a program that they came up with as a result of different reasons, which I won't even say here, but this was a program that they came up with, and it was for people who are currently in Canada. They were accepting 90,000 applicants under that TR to PR stream. It was geared at international students, people who are working in Canada, to help them to apply for permanent residence, right? Without having to resort to other programs. Some of them may have had to go back home, different reasons. So these, they had 90,000 slots that would have taken up some of the capacity, because this was not planned previously, right? So that would have taken up some of the capacity that would have previously been allocated, or the target that would have been previously allocated to the federal high skills category. And the TR to PR is basically temporary to permanent residence pathway. So temporary residence to permanent residence pathway that was made available to temporary residents who are in Canada, basically. So that was last year. So they've had to allocate some of the target to the TR to PR for both 2022 and 2023, because remember, those are still in progress, right? Those applications will still be, some of them not yet. I've had clients who were finalized back in 2021, but there are still applicants who are not yet finalized. And so that would have taken up some of the quota as well, right? So things are not expected to return to normal until 2024. At least that's what the government is projecting. We don't know how things may change, but those are the numbers that are presented. The other numbers, so we have the economic pilots, like the caregiver pilots, the agri-food pilots, the rural and northern immigration pilots. Those numbers are fairly consistent over the next 3 years. So 2022, it starts at 10,000, goes up to 10,250, then it goes up to 11,000, then 12,000. The next one, the Atlantic Immigration Program, as well as the provincial nominee programs, is another one to really focus on. So you'll notice that the targets are still high for the PNP programs. And so that means if you were in that federal high skilled category, and again, that is the skilled worker program, the Canadian Experience Class program. The thing to look to, where if you are not among those 55,000 people that will be admitted, the other place to look will be at the provincial nominee programs. You'll see the draws continue, right? You have Alberta that's making draws from the express entry system. We have Ontario drawing people from the express entry system. With Ontario, it's going to be within a range, right? Right now, they're going up to 467, right? So some people have been using different strategies, even reducing with an aim of reducing their scores so that they can be in that range to be selected. The PNP, getting a PNP nomination is going to be golden, right? So if you have a notification of interest from any province, don't be picky, just take it if your goal is to get to Canada, right? That should be the number one goal, get to Canada, and then you can figure out once you are here and settled, you can figure out where you want to live permanently, right? But the goal should be to come to Canada, to get to Canada. So if you are selected by a province that maybe you were not expecting that nomination, or you really didn't want to go to that province, it's a coveted thing right now to get a PNP nomination. So if you do get one, definitely want to make use of that. So getting a PNP nomination is going to be the saving grace for a lot of people who would not have been selected under the federal high skills program because of the pause in draws. And then when it eventually resumes, I expect, based on the target that they have, that the draws, when they do resume, that it would be closer towards the end of the year. And based on that, we expect as well, if you look at the composition of the pool, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in the pool. And also, if you look at the scores are very high. So of course, there will be some people who naturally would not have been looking for a direct invitation to apply. Like when you go in the pool, your aim is to get a PNP nomination, right? If your score is not the highest in the pool. So the lack of draws should not really bother you so much, as your goal really should be getting a provincial nomination. The other option that's going to be available for some people is to look at studying in Canada as a pathway to permanent residence. And what we expect to see is that there will be a lot more people applying to study in Canada. So it's going to make it even more competitive. The quality of the application that you'll be producing, like your study plan, which is a critical part. Okay, guys. Yeah, so like the study plan, which is a critical part of that type of application, is going to be very, very, very important for success, right? So that type of application is going to be, we expect to see a lot more people opting to study. It's going to mean that your application, your documents has to be in order, right? Your funds have to be there. The evidence that you're providing has to make sense. It has to be substantial. So the application that you're putting together has to be sound. It has to be sound study plan. Your reasoning for wanting to come to Canada has to make sense to the officer, because they can accept so many persons out of everyone that's applying, right? So that will definitely be the pathway that a lot of people will be going as a result. And then what you find to why that might be a good pathway for a lot of people is because when you are in Canada, you have access to a lot more programs. So if you're in Canada, maybe as a student or as a worker, and you cannot find a pathway to apply for permanent residence, then something's not right. Something's not right. You're not doing something, or you're not willing to do what it requires or what it takes to have that happen. But if you're in Canada, there will be a pathway to permanent residence. It's going to be so much easier. It's 10 times easier to be successful in that regard, in applying for permanent residence in Canada than outside Canada. And that's because those who are in Canada they will have access to a lot more programs, right? So that's just what it is. All right, so I'm seeing some question there. I'll have to go shortly. I have a 1 o'clock, but need to form out a plan. Yes. This immigration stuff, guys, it's serious stuff. It's serious business. Don't take it lightly. I heard somebody say yesterday that people tend to take applying to Canada very lightly. Like they would be applying to go to the US, and they're thinking that it's harder, but really sometimes coming to Canada is harder because, one, you don't get to be interviewed. So you're not interviewed by the officer in person. They're making their decision based on what you submit, especially as it relates to your study permit application. They are making a decision based on what you submit in that application. You don't get to explain anything. So it's a lot harder, right? And then on the face of things, Canada will say, yes, we're accepting 1 million people, right? But it doesn't mean that they're just opening the borders and letting every and anybody in. There is a process to it, and there is due diligence that you have to take when you're applying. And yes, you can enter more than one program. So I'm just looking at a question here. So if I am not in Canada now, should I have an express entry account or PNP account so that I can be eligible for a draw? Well, if you're not in Canada and the goal is to get to Canada, to get permanent residence in Canada, of course, there's no way that you can be considered if you're not in any of the programs. So you have to get into one of the programs before you can be considered. That is definitely a given. Getting into the different streams will be based on eligibility, right? So, I mean, we talk about this all the time. Just the process starts with determining eligibility. What program are you eligible for? And what are the options? Because sometimes some people may have multiple options, and it's good to know what those options are so that you can make an informed decision about which pathway you want to take, right? Okay, let me see what other questions are here. I'm going to hop off shortly, guys. Do you know the time frame from study permit? I'm not sure I understand that question. Not sure what. Techie. I'm not sure I understand that question. Do you mean the processing time? Is that what you're asking? Study permits, typically, we've had study permits processing us in less than 1 month, and we have had some that have gone up to three months. So it depends on where you're applying from. So the processing times are usually different based on, the region where you're applying from. Those are factors. Some countries it can go up to 6 months, but it's definitely going to be the fastest way in terms of processing times. How can you get nominated? To get nominated, you have to be in one of the provincial nomination programs. Okay, I think I answered the questions here. All right, guys, I think that's it. Are the PNP draws high this year, or is it still varies? Different provinces will have draws at different times. You'll see, like with British Columbia, they have a draw every month. Based on the targets, though, for example, so if I go back to the table, the IRCC table, the draws that they have planned for this year is 83,500 PNP draws, right? So this is based on, so these targets are high level, 83,500, but then the 83,500 for this year will be broken down by province. So each province will get a certain allocation, and then from there they decide throughout the year how many invitations they're gonna issue at different points, right? So they'll each have a target, they'll each have a quota, and then based on that, they will send out invitations until their quota is full for the year. So that's how it works. So 2022, 83,500. 23, it's 86,000. And then in 2024, it goes up to 93,000. So that's the target. Okay, so my work permit expires soon. Can you help me get a new one? I'm from Jamaica working in Canada. Yeah, you can send us an email. Send us an email and we can explore that further. The email address to send it to is info@nccanadaimmigration.com. If one has an acceptance letter from a university, how can you assist from there? So when you're studying in Canada, to study, it's a two-step process. So it usually starts off with getting accepted. So that's the first step. It looks like you've completed the first step. So usually finding a program, getting accepted into that program. Usually you would recommend applying to more than one program so that there is something there in case you don't get into the one that you want to, but it depends on the person. Then the next step from there is to apply for your study permit. So if you're interested in getting help with applying for your study permit, definitely send us a message. I see you're on Instagram. Send us a DM, and then my team can direct you from there. All right, guys. So I think that's it for questions. Would you recommend being vaccinated? Absolutely. Yeah. Before applying for a Canadian visa, yes. If you apply at this time and you're not vaccinated, it's likely that your application won't be looked at least not right now, because you wouldn't be eligible to travel to Canada, right? You would not be eligible to travel to Canada. So definitely recommended. Okay, guys, so thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to check off now. I have to hop on another meeting, but we'll catch up with you once again next week. Stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time.